Poetry Center, bringing poetry to Patterson since 1980 at Passaic County Community College.
Our next reader is also a second prize winner, Abby Murray, whose second chapbook, Quick Draw Poems from a Soldier's Wife, from Finishing Line Press, 2012, is based on her husband's deployment in Iraq and Afghanistan. She serves as director of the Binghamton Poetry Project, which is an after-school program for children and senior citizens, and poetry editor for Harper Palette. Let's welcome Abby Murray.
Thank you to the judges for choosing one of my poems. I'm going to read this one first. It's called A Poem for Ugly People. Only we are not supposed to know they are ugly, and they are not supposed to think we are writing, and they are supposed to think we are writing about the person standing behind them at the coffee cart, behind them in the elevator, behind them as they compare the price of generic and brand name Tylenol. Always the ugly people are behind us, the ones we don't see but can forever identify, whose skin tags are vaguely tick-shaped and hang from the cheekbones of women who learned in first grade classrooms how to spell the word beautiful and pictured themselves when they wrote it, slinging gray loops of pencil around that string of vowels we can't differentiate when we hear them called to us from the young teacher's mouth. Beautiful, then ugly, with its trusty noise like gum on the tongue, and familiar, every syllable spelled the way it sounds. We learn what ugly is right before we learn that seeing it on the face of a friend makes us cruel. Long before we understand the body is a wrapper, tightly cinched around but not a part of the way we live. Ugly people of the world, I want you to know that without us, there would be no perfect breasts or the shallow dip of a man's collarbone. Without us, there would be no statues parading in bronze through parks or even the smell of sunlight on cedar. When my sister's first boyfriend called me an ugly cow, I wish I'd had the sense to tell him that without me, no one could see a cardinal in winter and know it was a wonderful thing. The way he preens like a beating heart in the blackened plum, and we shield our eyes from the glare of the snow to watch it. As Maria mentioned in my bio, I write often about Tom's deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I predict that I will be writing about that again in the future many times. This one I actually just wrote recently, even though this happened after his first tour in Iraq. He would bring back gifts for me from people that he was working with, the Iraqi interpreters. They would send gifts to his wife. It was very bizarre, but very sweet, and so I wrote this about this. It's called Your Interpreter Sends Me a House Dress. When you return to Iraq or Afghanistan, you are given new clothes as gifts. The long robe made of goat fur that even folded up is the size of a small desk. The brown turban, the rough cotton tunic and pants. We have photographs of you sipping chai in these clothes, sitting cross-legged in the sun. Your teeth shine as you laugh with the Iraqi interpreter who sits beside you holding bread in his hand. When you leave, he will be hunted by men who come down from the hills at night in white garments like so many stars crashing into the earth. He will send you messages that say, "My brother." He will be rescued by civilians sent to San Francisco to work in a parking garage. On your last day in Iraq, he gives you a house dress pressed flat in a plastic envelope and says, "It is a gift for your wife, a woman who accepts gifts from men other than her husband because she can, because she does not yet know that sending a dress to his Iraqi wife would be unforgivable, the acknowledgement of skin beneath her veil." The dress is meant to be worn indoors, orange and yellow with flashes of red, the color of so many explosions I've watched on the news, balloons of flame that float over broken mosques. At home in our dining room, I pull the dress on even though I am ashamed of its slim waist and fussy gold thread, the zebra lame pattern stretched thin across my broad Polish shoulders and barreled chest, the Virgin Mary lying tarnished on a tin medallion under my throat. I am too tall, too wide, and too plain for this dress, too frank and impatient for its shimmering neckline and narrow sleeves. I feel like I am smothering it. We hang it on one of your good suit hangers at the back of our closet where it smolders and gleams between wool sweaters and skirts, throws sparks of light into our shoes. And this last poem is called On Grasshoppers and Head Trauma. Cut through the grassy median behind the university parking lot, and you will shake loose a cloud of grasshoppers, silver bodies striped with white like sunflower seeds. One of them flings herself headlong into my driver's side door, and the crack of her shell against metal is only something like the sound of a skull pitched to the wall of an armored vehicle as it twirls above a desert landscape, lands in a puff of sand, is picked over by men whose bones are unbruised, and the fractured bodies are dragged out, carried away, the vehicle left split open in the dust like a rib cage. When the war sent you home, I put my hands in your hair and felt your skull the way I feel cantaloupes at Whole Foods, searching for any softness. Tonight, one grasshopper lands on her back beneath my tire, dazed, accidentally showing me the pale patchwork of her belly. When I crouch, she rights herself, kicks backward into the grass, where maybe her lover is waiting, ready to pat her smooth sides one hair's width at a time, feel for splinters between the eyes. Thank you.
Now we're going to the third prize winners, and Jason Allen is our next reader. He has an MFA from Pacific University. His work has been published or is forthcoming in Passages North, Patterson Literary Review, Contemporary American Voices, The Molotov Cocktail, Oregon Literary Review, Split Infinitive, and other venues. He hopes to one day meet Tom Waits and buy him a cup of coffee. Let's welcome Jason Allen.
Well, this is a real honor to be here, and it's just especially cool that I'm friends with Dante and Abby, and that we've been in the same workshop with Maria, so it's like family. This first poem is called The Story of My Scar, and I have a scar right between my eyes, which you might not notice most of the time, but when you do, it's really pronounced because it's right there. In the mirror, I see my mother, running down a dirt road in Vermont. I am the screaming toddler on her hip, my face covered in blood just after I fell, and caught the sharp corner of a table between my eyes. I feel the need to apologize for every detail of the story of my scar, for that awful half mile, for my toddler loneliness, for that solitude of those dense Green Mountain woods, for being born in that log cabin, for Pop, who had the car, parked at a bar all day, and never apologized, but instead blamed her for letting me fall. When I see my scar, I see my mother running through those woods, a single parent to be, the only parent I would ever need. So most of my poems are really kind of dark and heavy, so I wrote this one in Maria's class purposely to write something more lighthearted. It's called Blondie and Me. I discovered sex while watching The Muppet Show. When Blondie songs were new on the radio, when Debbie Harry with her bottle blonde hair strode out onto the stage, Muppets and humans mixed together in the audience, and she sang Call Me, calling for someone to call her anytime, to please call me anytime. I'm 6 years old, legs crossed, a mere 2 feet from the TV. I don't know how to describe what's happening to me, to my body, but I want to call her. I imagine this thin, sort of naughty woman is urging me to call her from our wall-mounted rotary phone. She's so pretty, she's so in control. The Muppets all seem to think so too. And the thought of her answering when I call stirs something warm in my stomach. And I like it, but it's also kind of weird. Anyway, our date will be a trip to the movies, and I will hold her hand while we watch E.T. And she will whisper something adult in my ear, and then we will get married, this woman, Blondie and me. So I'm going to close with this poem. This is the one that tied for third place for the Young Ginsberg Awards. It's called Pop. I'm sick to death of writing about you, sick of wondering where you've been since you disappeared. The day you shaved your beard, you were a stranger in the house, a pale, young, terrifying face. The day you took me to the bar and left me longing for the barmaid in the low-cut shirt, who put extra cherries in my Shirley temples, over-prepared me for the world of girls I would come to know in kindergarten. The day when I pretended to be you with a mug of ginger ale, when I slammed it back and choked on an ice cube, you shoved a fist into my gut until the ice shot from my throat and smashed against the wall, and I went from blue to breathing. That day you saved my life. The first day you didn't come home, the uneasy peace. The days that followed, those Sunday afternoons with you, the stranger who read the newspaper, the stranger who chain smoked next to us while the TV babysat. You trained us to remain silent and unseen. The last message you left on Father's Day of all days, when you said you were about to be homeless, I might never hear from you again. It plays on a loop inside my head. Pop, if you're reading this, I'm sorry for how you've suffered. I'm sorry the police and hospitals have provided only crumbs. I've come up empty in my search for you. If you're reading this, you should know your mother and older brother have passed away. You should know I want to forgive, but I'm sick of writing this poem. I'm sick of wondering where you've been since you disappeared.
Third place winner is Kenneth Ronkowitz, and Kenneth Ronkowitz teaches at New Jersey Institute of Technology and Montclair State University. He's been the editor since 1998 of poetsonline.org, a monthly online poetry magazine and website for poetic inspiration. Check it out, it's really interesting. He is the recipient of 2 Dodge Foundation writing grants, and his poetry has been nominated twice for the Pushcart Prize. His published poetry appears in Tiferet, English Journal, Patterson Literary Review, Beloit Poetry Journal, Roadmount, Prague, and anthologies including The Paragel and The Crafty Poet. Let's welcome Ken Ronkowitz.
And I will add my thanks to Maria and also Susan and Smita, the people who keep the Poetry Center and Patterson Literary Review and all the cultural things that they do for Patterson, Passaic County, and the ripples that go out into the larger world. I'm going to bookmark the poems I read with the first one that ever was in Patterson Literary Review, and then end with the one that's in the current. 57 Chevy. In our 57 Chevy, coming home late at night, I would curl up on the floor, pillowing my head on that hill that was the drive shaft to the rear wheels. Their turning hummed in my ears, heat from the exhaust system warmed the floor beneath me. Not even a thought of seatbelts. The great wall of my parents on the front bench seat protected me. My father had just had that car repainted a robin's egg blue and reupholstered to celebrate its 8th birthday. It was the year he got sick. The car would sit for 6 years in our garage as he moved in and out of beds at home and away. He would not let us sell the car, determined he would one day drive again. Some days he could start the engine. Later he would ask me to start it, and I was a glad 14-year-old who drove to the sidewalk and back up the driveway into the garage. When he was gone, I sold the car. My mother could not understand my eagerness to do so, my willingness to take so little money to have it taken away. She could not understand how it could have meant so little to me. A little bit lighter. This is a poem for all those people who write poetry and give workshops or go to workshops. And it's a poem inside a poem. It has a little poem inside of it that was written at a workshop. It's called Prompt Response. Poets are sexy. That's why we love to be together. We say it is to write and to practice our craft and be in the presence of others who do, but we are poets, and we love the tease and the touch and the lick of the words. The poet with books to sell tells us to write about an object in the room. I choose the calla lilies in a vase next to the woman I have been watching. Long-stemmed, they rise to a top, fluted like lips, that a tongue might probe like a bee buzzing for it. Embraced by slender green fingers that first held them, now tilted back to see the bloom. Fluid and flesh, it opens and spills. The weight of it makes your head drop. Your own lips dry and wanting to find something to rest upon. Does anyone want to share what they wrote? We all want to share, but some are coy, patient, or afraid. I read first. I want there to be time for discussion. I read slowly, without looking at her. I look at the lilies, the window, our teacher, until I need something to rest upon. I look right at her, and she is looking at me. Poets are sexy. That's why we love to be together. Billy Collins has a poem called Undressing Emily Dickinson. So this is my poem that goes next to that one in the book. Sex with Amelia Earhart. Who I really love. I love Amelia Earhart. Afterwards, you said, the sky is like flesh, and you love getting lost in it. Wrapped in your Electra cockpit, dressed in your leather and silk, heat rolling over you from an engine, holding you in the clouds, you would forget and lift your goggles, and the heat would feel cool, and your head would fall back, and your hands would squeeze tightly, and you knew you were in control, but did not want to be. Then the world would dive, your head would jerk forward, and you had to level off, make up for the lost moments, use the artificial horizon to return to the world. Reflected in the glass of your goggles lying on the floor, on top of your silk and leather, I could see you, naked, eyes closed, your body smooth, white, wingless. And this is the poem that's in the current issue. That summer between. 4th grade was the year we learned cursive writing. Miss Goldfarb's handwriting on the blackboard was as beautiful as she was, with long, smooth curves and dresses and skirts that moved like the uppercase L and stood up, head held high like the Q of a queen. She did not like my handwriting. Too small and cramped straight up and down without the grace of curves. I could not stay within the paper's 2 bold blue lines or observe the lighter blue midline of the Palmer method. But I still loved her. I loved that she let me read more aloud than the other children in the class. I loved her for allowing me to bring in my science and nature books and to show my fossils and minerals, a snakeskin, lost feathers I had found. That was the year they found the tumor in my father's brain. I did not know it then, but all the teachers knew what had happened. The surgery that took part of his right side of his brain, and with it took the use of his left arm and leg, and then slowly took him. My assignment for 5th grade placed me in Mrs. Alterman's class, a new teacher that I did not know and did not want to know. But when we lined up in the schoolyard that day in September, it was Miss Goldfarb that called us all to line up behind her. She had married over the summer. I could not believe she had done this to me. I brought no books, no rocks, no unusual plants to school that year. I printed my notes and papers when I could in square, uniform block letters. After school, I went straight home. I helped my father shave and use the bathroom and climb upstairs. I went to the supermarket and I shopped for my mother. I looked after my sister. I put my fossils and crystals in a box down the basement. I let my feathers go from my bedroom window one day and watched them fall until they were lost once again. Thank you.